evening. I always thought shadows were just the absence of light, simple, harmless things that followed us around like old friends. But everything changed one summer evening when I moved into an old house at the edge of town. It was my first place away from my parents, a quaint little fixer-upper with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards. The price was surprisingly low, which should have raised some red flags, but I was excited to start my new life. The first few days were uneventful. I unpacked, rearranged furniture, and explored the neighborhood. But as night fell, things started to feel off. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, shadows darting past doorways or flitting across the walls, but every time I turned to look, nothing was there. I chalked it up to fatigue. After all, I was still getting used to my new routine. One night, while sitting on the couch and binge-watching my favorite show, I noticed something peculiar. The shadows in my living room seemed to shift and sway, as if they had a mind of their own. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the flickering light from the TV. But then I heard it, a soft, raspy whisper that seemed to echo through the room. "Help me." I froze. My heart raced as I turned off the television and strained to listen. Silence. Was I imagining things? I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. After a few moments of tense quiet, I decided I was just being paranoid. I grabbed a snack and headed to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, I woke up late, the sunlight streaming through my window. I dismissed the previous night's events as a dream, but the unsettling feeling lingered. As the days passed, the whispers returned. They grew louder, more desperate, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. One evening, I decided to investigate. Armed with nothing but my phone's flashlight, I ventured into the dim corners of my house. I followed the whispers, which seemed to lead me down the narrow hallway that connected my bedroom to the rest of the house. The air grew colder as I approached the end of the hall, where a small door stood slightly ajar. I had never noticed it before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, revealing a dark, cramped space that smelled of dust and mildew. It was a storage closet filled with old boxes and furniture covered in sheets. My flashlight beam danced over the shadows, revealing a jumble of forgotten items. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, determined to uncover the source of the whispers. As I rifled through the boxes, I felt a sudden chill. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse, and I could hear the whispering again, more frantic this time. "Help me, help me." I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. Panic surged as I banged on the door, calling for help. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with dread. "Help me. Free me." I felt the shadows closing in, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. In a surge of adrenaline, I managed to pry the door open and stumbled back into the hallway. I ran to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Was I losing my mind? Had I imagined the voices, the shadows? The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I avoided the storage closet and spent most of my time in the living room with the lights on. But the shadows continued to haunt me. They flickered in the corners of my vision, whispering in the dark, begging for release. I knew I had to confront whatever was in that closet. One stormy night, with thunder rumbling outside, I gathered my courage and returned to the storage closet. This time, I brought a flashlight and a tape recorder, hoping to capture the whispers. I opened the door slowly, feeling a cold draft rush past me. The shadows seemed to thicken, swirling around me like a fog. "Show yourself." I shouted, my voice trembling. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, a dark silhouette that seemed to writhe and twist, lacking any distinct features. It hovered just out of reach, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "Help me," it whispered again, and I realized it was the same voice I had been hearing. "Free me." "Free you from what?" I demanded, though I was terrified. The figure drifted closer, and I could almost make out a face, a twisted expression of pain and sorrow. Trapped in the shadows, forever, I felt a strange compulsion to help, but fear held me back. "What do you want from me?" "Light, bring light." In that moment, I understood. This spirit was trapped in the shadows, unable to escape without help. I hesitated, my heart racing, but I knew I couldn't leave it like this. I grabbed my flashlight, illuminating the space around me. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in anguish, "Please, stay back." I yelled, my hands shaking as I held the light. "I want to help." As the beam of light touched the figure, it shrank back, and I could see the outline of a woman. Her features were distorted, but I could see the anguish in her eyes. "You must believe, trust the light." With newfound determination, I focused the light on the figure. The shadows writhed, trying to pull her back, but she pushed forward, inching closer to the light. The whispers turned into cries, echoing through the room. "Help me." I held my breath, pouring all my energy into the beam of light. The shadows began to recede, revealing more of her form. I could see now that she was wearing a tattered dress, and her hair floated around her like smoke. "Just a little more," I urged, feeling the weight of the shadows pressing against me. The room began to vibrate as the figure reached for the light. The darkness around us twisted and churned, fighting to keep her from escaping. But I wouldn't give up. I kept shining the light, pushing back against the shadows until finally, with a loud, piercing scream, they retreated. In a blinding flash, the figure stepped into the light, and I watched in awe as she transformed before my eyes. Her features softened, the pain and torment fading away. She turned to me, a grateful smile breaking through the remnants of her anguish. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now a gentle breeze. "You freed me." And just like that, she disappeared, leaving the room in silence. The shadows that had haunted me for weeks evaporated, and for the first time, I felt a sense of peace settle over the house. I stood there in shock, my heart still racing, the remnants of her presence lingering in the air. From that day on, the house felt different. The oppressive energy was gone, replaced by a warmth that filled every corner. I never heard the whispers again, and the shadows no longer loomed in my peripheral vision. I had confronted my fears and helped a lost soul find her way. As I settled into my new life, I often thought about the woman in the shadows. I hoped she had found the peace she so desperately sought. The experience had changed me. I realized that sometimes, even the darkest places can be lit by a single act of courage. And while shadows may always exist, they don't have to be feared. They can be faced, understood, and even freed. The getaway. It all started with a weekend getaway that turned into a nightmare. My friends and I decided to escape the city and rent an old cabin in the woods. I had heard stories about the area, tales of strange occurrences and the whispers of long-lost souls, but I brushed them off as local folklore. We were all eager for a break, and the cabin was a perfect getaway. As we drove deeper into the woods, the trees thickened, creating a canopy that blocked out the sun. It was beautiful, in a haunting sort of way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. When we finally arrived, the cabin looked even more dilapidated than I remembered from the pictures. The paint was peeling, and the windows were clouded with grime, giving it an eerie, almost sinister vibe. "Let's check it out," my friend Mark exclaimed, breaking the tense atmosphere. The rest of us laughed nervously and piled out of the car, eager to explore our temporary home. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly cozy, despite the worn furniture and dusty corners. There was a fireplace, a few old books scattered about, and an ancient-looking map hanging crookedly on the wall. As I examined the map, I noticed some strange markings. They looked like trails, but they also appeared to outline something deeper, a pattern I couldn't quite decipher. "Hey, look at this," I called to the others, pointing at the map. "What do you think it is?" "Probably just an old hunting trail," Jenna said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Or maybe a treasure map." We all laughed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the markings meant something more. That night, as we sat around the fireplace, I couldn't help but notice how the shadows flickered and danced on the walls. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump, but the others seemed oblivious to the tension that hung in the air. After a few drinks, Mark proposed a game of truth or dare. I joined reluctantly, feeling the weight of the night creeping in. As the game progressed, things took a dark turn. I dare you to go outside and scream at the woods. Mark challenged Jenna, who hesitated but eventually accepted. Fine, I'll do it, she said, smirking. Just to prove I'm not scared. She stepped outside, and the door creaked shut behind her. We waited, half expecting her to return laughing. But when she didn't come back after a few minutes, a sense of unease settled over us. Should we check on her? I suggested, feeling a knot of anxiety twist in my stomach. Give her a few more minutes, Mark said, trying to sound brave, but his voice wavered. After what felt like an eternity, we finally stepped outside. The moon cast an eerie glow over the clearing, but Jenna was nowhere in sight. Jenna, I called, my voice breaking the silence. No response. Panic set in, and we scattered into the trees, calling her name. The deeper we ventured into the woods, the thicker the darkness became, swallowing the light from the cabin. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, but clear enough to send chills down my spine. Help me, I froze, straining to hear. Jenna? I shouted, but the only reply was the rustling of leaves. Mark and Jenna suddenly appeared from the shadows, their faces pale and strained. What happened? I asked, my heart racing. I think I saw something, Jenna stammered, trembling. In the trees, it was watching me. We hurried back to the cabin, fear hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Once inside, we locked the door and tried to shake off the creeping dread. We laughed nervously, but I could see the fear in their eyes. I don't like this place, Jenna admitted. Something feels off. Maybe we should just leave, I suggested, glancing at the map again. This cabin isn't worth whatever is out there. Just then, the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped. I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, making me shiver. Then, a loud thud echoed from the back of the cabin, rattling the walls. What was that? Mark asked, his voice rising in panic. Probably just the wind, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. That we huddled together, the air thick with tension. The thudding continued, rhythmic and insistent, as if something was trying to break in. Suddenly, the door swung open, creaking on its hinges, and I felt a chill rush over me. The moonlight flooded the room, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. It was a man, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to penetrate through to my very soul. He wore ragged clothing, and his skin appeared almost gray in the moonlight. Help me, he whispered, his voice rasping like dry leaves. I stumbled back, fear gripping my chest. Who are you? I managed to choke out. I'm trapped, he said, extending a skeletal hand toward us. You have to help me. In that moment, I remembered the markings on the map. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling. Find the heart, he said, and then he pointed into the woods. You must find the heart. Without waiting for a response, he vanished into the darkness, leaving us in stunned silence. What just happened? Jenna gasped, her eyes wide. I don't know, I replied, my heart racing. But we need to figure out what he meant. We decided to follow the markings on the map, which led deeper into the woods. Armed with flashlights, we made our way through the dense underbrush, following the trails marked on the map. The air grew heavy, and the shadows around us felt alive, shifting and watching our every move. After what felt like hours of wandering, we stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an ancient tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted, roots snaking deep into the earth. Something glinted at the base, a small, heart-shaped locket. That must be it, I said, kneeling down to pick it up. As my fingers brushed against the cold metal, the ground trembled beneath us, and the whispers returned, rising in intensity. Help us, free us. We stood frozen as the shadows gathered around us, twisting and swirling. I clutched the locket tightly, feeling its pulse beneath my fingers. Do you think this is what he meant? Jenna asked, her voice shaky. I think so, I replied, glancing back at Mark. We have to do something. With a deep breath, I raised the locket to the tree. We're here to help. I shouted. We want to set you free. As soon as the locket touched the bark, a blinding light erupted from the tree, illuminating the clearing. The shadows writhed and screamed, and the whispers transformed into cries of relief. The figure of the man reappeared, his face softer now, almost peaceful. Thank you, he said, his voice echoing through the clearing. You have freed us. With that, the light enveloped him, and he dissolved into the air, taking the shadows with him. The atmosphere shifted, and the woods felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. We stood there, breathless, watching as the clearing transformed around us. The trees stood tall and vibrant, and the whispers faded into a gentle breeze. Finally, I turned to my friends, relief flooding over me. We did it, I said, smiling through the adrenaline. We actually did it, Jenna echoed, her voice filled with disbelief. As we made our way back to the cabin, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had faced the darkness together and brought light to the lost souls trapped in the woods. The experience would forever change us, a reminder that even in the most terrifying of circumstances, courage and compassion can lead to freedom. From that day on, the woods held a different energy. The stories of shadows lurking in the trees faded into myth, and I knew that we had played a part in healing a piece of forgotten history. The legends. It was a chilly October evening when I received a strange message from an old friend. Jenna and I hadn't spoken in years, but her name lit up my phone with a reminder of long-forgotten memories. The message read, "You won't believe what I found. Meet me at the old cemetery." I hesitated. The cemetery had always been a local haunt for ghost stories and eerie legends. Growing up, we'd dare each other to enter at night, but I never had the guts. Still, curiosity gnawed at me, and after a brief internal struggle, I decided to go. I arrived at the cemetery just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a dark hue over the gravestones. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and a shiver ran down my spine. I spotted Jenna near the entrance, her silhouette barely visible against the fading light. "Hey," she called, waving me over. She looked different, her hair was messy, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Thanks for coming. What's going on?" I asked, trying to shake off my unease. "I found something in the old section," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I think it's a grave, but it's not on any of the maps. You have to see this." I followed her deeper into the cemetery, the sound of crunching leaves underfoot echoing in the silence. We ventured into the overgrown part, where the gravestones leaned at odd angles, half buried in the earth. Shadows stretched long and eerie, and the atmosphere felt thick with history. "There it is," Jenna said, stopping in front of a crumbling stone marker that was nearly obscured by weeds. "Can you believe it? It looks ancient." The stone was weathered and cracked, with barely legible writing etched into it. I leaned in closer, squinting to read the faded letters. "Here lies Elijah Hart," I murmured. "Died 1863. Jenna knelt beside it, brushing away the leaves. I had a feeling there was something unusual about this place. I could just feel it. Suddenly, I felt a chill in the air, the temperature dropping dramatically. "We should probably head back," I suggested, glancing around nervously. "Wait," she insisted, looking around as if she were searching for something. "There's something else." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small object, a tarnished locket. "I found this too, lying next to the grave. I think it belonged to him." She opened the locket, revealing a faded photograph of a young man and a woman. Their faces looked eerily familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen them before. As Jenna held it up, the shadows around us seemed to deepen, and a sudden gust of wind blew through the cemetery, rattling the branches overhead. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my heart racing. Yeah, it's like, something is here, Jenna replied, her voice trembling slightly. Without warning, a loud crash echoed through the cemetery. A nearby tombstone toppled over, sending a cloud of dust into the air. We both jumped, our hearts pounding in our chests. Let's go, I urged, but as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting between the gravestones. It was dark and shapeless, moving in and out of sight. Did you see that? I whispered, my voice shaky. See what? Jenna asked, her eyes wide. That shadow, over there. I pointed, but it had vanished. Maybe we should just leave, she said, her earlier bravado faltering. As we began to back away, the temperature dropped even further. I could see my breath in the air, and the whispering began, soft at first, but growing louder, echoing through the trees like a chorus of lost souls. Help us, find us, Jenna and I exchanged terrified glances. What is happening? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, she replied, gripping the locket tightly. But I think we need to get out of here. Just then, the shadows coalesced into a shape, dark and menacing. It loomed over us, its presence heavy and suffocating. A chill ran down my spine as I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. Who are you? Jenna shouted, her voice quaking. What do you want? The shadow surged forward, and I instinctively stepped back, colliding with a nearby gravestone. I felt a sharp pain in my back, but barely noticed as the figure began to take form. It twisted and writhed, revealing the features of a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a mournful expression. Elijah Hart, I breathed, recalling the name on the gravestone. The whispers intensified, echoing his name, filling the air with an unbearable weight of sorrow. We are trapped, the figure rasped, his voice like gravel. Help us find peace, free us from this place. What do you mean? Jenna asked, her voice trembling. How can we help you? The locket, he said, pointing a skeletal finger at the object in Jenna's hand. It binds us. You must return it to where it belongs. I glanced at Jenna, and she seemed to understand. But where? She asked, desperation creeping into her tone. Elijah's love, he whispered, his gaze piercing into mine. Find her grave. With that, the figure began to dissipate, the shadows retreating into the darkness. The whispers faded, leaving us in stunned silence. Do you think we should? Jenna asked, her voice barely audible. What if we don't? I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. We have to try. They need our help. Jenna nodded, and together, we set off deeper into the cemetery, scanning the gravestones for any sign of Elijah's love. The atmosphere was thick with tension, each step feeling heavier than the last. Shadows danced around us, but we pressed on, determination fueling our search. Finally, after what felt like hours, we stumbled upon a smaller, more ornate gravestone nestled among the overgrown weeds. The name read, Mary Hart, beloved wife of Elijah Hart. This must be it, Jenna said, kneeling down. She opened the locket and placed it gently at the base of the stone. We're here to help you. As soon as the locket touched the ground, a soft glow enveloped the gravestone. The air felt electric, charged with energy. The whispers returned, this time more harmonious, as if the spirits were singing, thank you, thank you. Elijah's figure materialized beside Mary's grave, their shadows merging into a serene light. The weight of sorrow lifted, and the cemetery transformed before our eyes, blooming with life as flowers began to sprout around the gravestones. The shadows faded, replaced by a comforting warmth. Your kindness has set us free, Elijah's voice echoed, filled with gratitude. You have restored our love. With one last glance, the figures began to dissolve, their forms becoming ethereal. The whispers softened, fading into a gentle breeze that carried their essence away. Jenna and I stood there, awestruck, as the cemetery transformed around us. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. We did it, Jenna said, tears in her eyes. Yeah, I replied, still trying to process what had just happened. We walked back toward the entrance, the shadows that once haunted us now merely a memory. The moon shone brightly above us, illuminating the path ahead. As we left the cemetery, I felt a profound connection to the past, a reminder that sometimes, helping others can lead to our own healing. The experience changed me. I no longer saw shadows as mere absences of light, but as echoes of stories waiting to be told.